How's everybody doing tonight? Welcome to Cup of Joe with Joe, and I am your host for this evening. Thank you for joining me. So remember, go to patreon.com, KRTD Media Group, sign up, become a Patreon. Yes. Tonight, we are going to talk about teachers in the news, education. Education. This actually comes up a couple of different times for a couple of different reasons. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the news. Teachers in America. Okay, this particular photo is interesting because it comes from a 2015 article about how the number of teachers from specific demographics are actually reducing in numbers. In particular, African American teachers all across America. As of 2015, and we've continued to see the decline as things continue to affect education all across the United States. Now, that's not necessarily key to what I am going to be talking about tonight. Reason why is because we've got a couple different issues. All of it comes back to education. What's going on in the schools? What's going on with teachers? What's going on with legislation across the United States and how it affects education? Thank you, Lena, Amber Lee, Kay. Thank you all for joining me tonight. Really do appreciate it. So, first up with regards, Randy Weingarten. Okay, now this is the American Federation of Teachers president. Okay, she insists that kids must continue to be masked in schools. This is a continuation of the COVID mandate and continues to be a big issue. Now, as what is essentially the leader of the teachers union in the United States, how you doing, Michelle? An awful lot of what she has to say has an influence over how teachers unions across the nation decide to address the issues with regards to, well, a number of issues. In this case, her big issue is related to COVID in schools. How do we deal with that? And she's essentially come out with the position that one policy fits all, regardless of where you are, under what conditions, anywhere in the United States. The effect of what's going on as far as community actions, interactions. The American Federations of Teachers has decided that it will insist upon a universal policy of masks in school. Now, from a number of different perspectives, this is particularly bad. One is it actually runs contrary to significant amount of evidence indicating that the children themselves are not actually at high risk, which means that, yes, there are deaths. It does happen. I will not deny that. High risk individuals continue to exist in all the demographics, in all of the age groups. And it's really up to the individual to be able to assess what the risk is, rather than coming at it from a universal policy. Now, when it comes to COVID in American schools right now, we continue to see an awful lot of trouble. And I'm going to go ahead and dig up a personal story right now with regards to that. I have a 15-year-old daughter, and she has been attempting to attend school for the last 2 years. Every other week, there is a near exposure, and she has to check out of school until she gets a negative test back. During this time, when she is out of school, she has to continue to maintain her coursework and her course studies, while in an atmosphere different than what she's been taught to learn in. In addition to that, the ability of a number of teachers across the United States to be able to adapt to the remote learning systems on an intermittent basis. That is something as simple as returning an email questioning a specific assignment or a specific problem while the student is at home waiting for their COVID recovery test to come back. And we continue to see this as a significant problem all across the United States. We, even when it comes to, I hate to use the term here, neurotypical development. Okay, this start-stop process for students attending education, whether it's public, whether it's private, regardless of what it is, their ability to adapt on the fly like that and be able to continue to change environments, their learning environment, one week in school, the next week at home, trying to interact and be involved in a level that allows them to continue to maintain the pace of development that's expected. And this isn't just students. Teachers across the United States continue to run into the same problem consistently. Amber Lee, let's go ahead and bring yours up here. Had to finish junior and senior year via mostly remote learning, right? And you're one of the lucky ones. You have a daughter who doesn't experience a degree of neurodiversity that is adversely affected by the way we do the remote learning, or even the way we do the learning in classrooms. Okay, so when it comes to neurodiversity, being able to handle the diversity of interactions, the way our children process the information, whether or not they're operating on what is currently considered the spectrum, whether they're considered neurotypical, whether or not there's some other issues going on. And this comes through an awful lot of significant issues with regards to childhood trauma, childhood post-traumatic stress injuries, and development, emotional development as we continue to go through. All of these affect a student's ability to learn, including the consistent change in environments as they learn. Now, I'm sure there's going to be an awful lot of teachers out there that are going, Joe, you don't know what you're talking about. Well, to a certain degree, no, I don't, because I am not certified in early childhood development or in public education. All I can do is talk about the issues as I see them. I can listen to what teachers have to say. I can listen to what students have to say. I can listen to the people around me that I associate with that operate in the spectrum, that display the extreme variety of neurodiversity that exists within America. And yes, when it comes to neurodiversity, no one is neurotypical. No one. We all process information in a different way. So Amber Lee, let's go ahead and bring, autistic, still in middle school, special classes, special education, having to work with specific teachers who may or may not be able to handle the constant change in environment, the new people coming and going, the associations of people as students, a special education student who has to go home for a period of time, for 2 weeks in order to wait for the diagnosis of COVID, or to wait for them to actually come back with a negative test. During this time, they are out of the school environment. They are out of the familiarity. Then they turn around and are injected right back in to the system 2 weeks later and expected to function just as if they had never left. Okay. That doesn't work for a significant number of individuals. See you in 2 weeks when you get back from vacation. We expect you to be where everybody else is in that time. Yeah. This continues to be a significant problem, especially as we're looking at, number of individuals. Right, Kay? Absolutely. Could you imagine trying to raise kids in this COVID education environment that we're dealing with right now? And, exactly. And that's one of those things. Special ed, you have teachers that are specifically trained in order to work with your child's neurodiversity, being able to work across the spectrum and be able to help them learn the best way they can. Even as parents, of neurodiverse children. Sometimes we, even though they're ours, right? Even though they're little versions of us, the way we've learned to cope and process information, or cope with the processing of information as we grew up. Maybe a little bit of us remembers, I had that problem as a child. I can't remember how I solved that problem as a child because it was beaten out of me. But we continue to have this problem. And let's talk about another issue with regards to the masks in school. Okay. Learning, education, emotional development. Okay. The ability to talk, the ability to see someone. Okay. Right now, you are watching me. You were watching me talk. You were watching my expressions, my facial movements. Do I have a tick? Do I have something that makes me distinctly me? Is there a tell when I'm experiencing a specific emotion? Okay. If I'm wearing a mask, significant amount of that process, the ability to tell and read and understand the emotional levels. No, you're good, Brandy. You're good, Brandy. Thank you for joining us, Eminence. And let's talk about this. The ability for you to read me, my ability to project my emotions, my feelings, for you to be able to see whether or not I'm happy, whether or not I'm smiling. You lose a significant amount of that capacity when a mask is put in place. We won't even talk about the hard of hearing individuals who can no longer read lips for those people who've never developed American Sign Language skills. And yes, I'm guilty. I do not know ASL. One of those good intentions I kept meaning to get around to. But again, hard of hearing students who can't see a teacher's face to be able to read their lips and understand what it is they're saying. The ability of other students to process that emotional information that is being provided by somebody's face, by their smiles, or their grimaces, their frown, their disappointment, or the tension in their jaw. All of that's now hidden by a mask. And the kids that are used to seeing each other have lost all of that additional information necessary in order to process for social and emotional development as they continue to grow. This is the challenge of what Randy Weingarten wants to see happen in education in the United States because of COVID. And one of the demographics that is at lowest risk, for long-term COVID effects, I'm not saying the risk is nil. I'm not saying that. Right, Eminence? Smiling people make me happy. Smiling people make me happy too. Absolutely, Eminence. It's nice to be able to see. It's nice to be that communication. It's silent, but it's obvious and it's present. And that's what she wants to do. She wants to deprive an entire generation of children, an entire generation of students, that emotional development. Okay. I'm sure there's an awful lot of parents out there that are thinking, no, I don't want my kid getting sick. I don't want my kid getting sick. Please pay attention. Okay. I don't want your kids getting sick either. I don't want them being laid out for 2 weeks because of COVID. But at the same time, I do not want to see them grow up emotionally stunted because they've been deprived several of the things that we consider to be important for early childhood development because we felt the risk was greater than the reward. Okay. Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate that. I really do. Okay. So again, American Federation of Teachers in addition to everything else, you need to remember that that is a public union. That is one where it is the union against the government. Take that into consideration when you take a look at what unions mean. Teachers' unions, police unions, those are public unions. Fire department unions, those are public unions. Okay, this isn't your International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. This isn't the Teamsters. You know, this isn't one of the local ones. Yep, Mary Tyler Moore. Ooh. And did I just date myself? Good one, Michelle. You caught me with that one. You caught me with that one. Yes, I watched Mary Tyler Moore while I was growing up. Came home from school, no less. Sit down in front of a TV and watch Mary Tyler Moore and the rest of the crew. Absolutely. This is a public union issue. Okay. As a result, this is the teachers against the state. This is the teachers against the government. This is the teachers' union against the people. Okay, so step back. Pay attention to what it is that's going on with regards to unions versus non-union, or union, non-union, public union versus private union. Make sure you understand exactly what that means when it comes to working with unions. Okay, right now, in the United States, there are certain public unions which have a significant amount of influence over legislation, including their pay, and what sort of compensation continues to go and develop with that. So, teachers' unions, again, Randy Weingarten, pay attention to what's going on with that, because the public union of teachers has a significant influence. Okay, next up. Okay. Alabama school official reports complaints of Black History Month is teaching critical race theory. Okay. Critical race theory has continued to be a big issue in legislation, in legislators. And unfortunately, it's one of those things that's become a dog whistle over the last 2 years. It's an idea right there, Brandy, the clear masks. Clear masks, for facial recognition. Okay. But back to this Black History Month. And Alabama deciding that teaching Black history during Black History Month represents teaching critical race theory. Okay. This is going to continue to be an issue, particularly around education, because both the left and the right have decided to rally around critical race theory as the dog whistle du jour. Thing is neither the left nor the right are actually talking about critical race theory when they say critical race theory. The left jumped on in defense of it, and we continue to see a significant amount of issues with regards to that. Of course, the right pushed it hard to begin with, but history is not critical race theory. Critical race theory itself is specifically the legal theory, the legal practice about how jurisprudence over the last 400 years in the Americas has affected race relations, and whether or not any of those laws continue to adversely affect groups of people because of the way the legislation was written. And so one of the things that we can talk about is history. History talks about Bacon's Rebellion back in 1675. Okay. Remember, this was 100 years before the American Revolution. Bacon's Revolution, 1675. And he went in, slaves, indentured servants, white, black, all the ethnicities that were associated with the underclass in 1675, rose up as a class, as a group, to demand certain rights. And the Bacon Rebellion was successful for about 5 years, at which point the British came in with all the big guns ablazing and set things back to the way they were. As a result, in 1705, the legislative and jurisprudence effects of Bacon's Rebellion took effect. Now, that's history. History, mind you. Okay. Now, from the perspective of critical race theory, is what legislation came out in 1705 that adversely affected race relations and the creation of race, no less, the creation of race as a social construct in legal theory in the Americas. The Virginia Slave Codes of 1705. That was the first time in which whiteness was defined in the Americas. (1705). As a result, we've continued to see that case law carried forward even through the Revolutionary War, even through the Constitution, 3/5 compromise, remember that, folks. That legislation, the Slave Codes of 1705, the creation of whiteness, the creation of race, the determination that the melanin count in an individual's skin could determine their rights, could determine their privilege, could determine their access. 1705, that's what critical race theory is about. The legislation, the case law that is carried forward, and how do we address those issues? There's a difference between history, critical race theory. Black History Month is strictly about history. What did or didn't happen? Critical race theory is about law. It's about policy. And the only place CRT is taught is university, primarily law. So when it comes to, is CRT being taught in grade school? No, history is being taught in grade school, folks. Okay. We are teaching history. Now, with regards to history, there's an awful lot of people who go back and say, well, I'm offended by that history. Dude, nobody cares if you're offended by history. History is what it is. We all know that history is inaccurate. We all know that to the victors goes the spoils, which also includes the privilege of writing history to fit your narrative. Because in the end, we all know that everybody's the hero in their own story. George Washington wrote history. He is the hero of the Revolutionary War. A lot of people go back and we take a look at what else was written about our founding fathers: Hamilton, Jefferson, Washington, Ben Franklin. We begin to understand that the history, the stories that were carried forward, that were put into our books, that were put into our history, that we read in grade school, the tall tales that made heroes of our founding fathers. Didn't necessarily capture the full scope of their personalities. didn't capture their sins. It's one thing we need to remember. All of our founding fathers were human. They all made mistakes. Some of those mistakes are still affecting us today. So remember that when it comes time to history. Now, I want to check something here, folks, because oh yeah. Okay. I'm going to come back to that here in a moment. Reason why is because I want to address a couple issues. Okay. Black History Month, that is all of February. One of the other things that we addressed, end of January, we had Holocaust Remembrance Day. Okay. 6 million Jewish people, ethnic and religious, 6 million of them. You know, and the thing is the Holocaust wasn't limited to just them. Okay. We remember the Holocaust as being, but there were other groups, there were other classes of people that were affected by the Holocaust. Taking a look at the LGBTQ community, okay, during the Weimar Republic, gay individuals were heavily prosecuted. Yeah, even afterwards, we talk about Turin. Turin was the guy who wrote Fathers of History. We'll get to that, Atlanta. We'll get to that. It sounds like an interesting discussion, absolutely. But Turin, after the war, even after the war, after we'd already determined that the Holocaust was in bad form, okay, Turin, it was found out that he was a homosexual. Britain, remember Britain, Turin won the war for Britain. Britain ordered chemical castration for Turin until he ended up killing himself because the psychotherapy drugs that they were putting him on in order to render him incapable ended up affecting him emotionally and neurologically until he was no longer functional. He ended up killing himself. This was a man who saved the Allies. This was the man who defeated, you know, the German Code. He ended up dying in Britain after the war because he was gay. Okay, during the Weimar, we continued to have, you know, the LGBTQ community. They were all herded up and put into the concentration camps in the exact same way. The Romanis, the Gypsies, you know, the transient peoples were all round up and put into the concentration camps. You know, all of these people continued to go into those. The U.S. during that same era, between, you know, the 1920s clear up until the 1950s, you know, the U.S. had an equal guilt associated with those same things. Not only had we just experienced the Trail of Tears with regards to the migration, we were doing repatriation raids in Oklahoma and Texas. We were taking people who had lived on earned land, and because local individuals had decided that their melanin count wasn't appropriate, they kidnapped them, sent them to Mexico. You know, these were American citizens. They kidnapped them, sent them to Mexico, and stole their land. We were doing that here in the U.S. to U.S. citizens just because of the color of their skin. 1942, February 19th. That was the order. Coming up on the 80th anniversary of that, folks. The 80th anniversary of the executive order calling for the internment of Japanese Americans on the West Coast. 80 years ago. We did that. Now, from a critical race theory perspective, there was race very much involved in that history. There was legislation, there was policy, which is subject to analysis through critical race theory to determine whether or not that legislation should or shouldn't have, whether it still has lingering effects, and what we can do to minimize the effects of the legislation from that executive order for internment. All of this comes back to critical race theory. It's not just about Black history. It's about Indigenous history. It's about Black history. It's about the integration of every diaspora that has ever come to America seeking asylum. Yeah, Brandy. A lot of Japanese internment camps, especially in the West Coast. You got all up and down Oregon, Washington, California, Nevada, Arizona. Idaho's got Camp Minidoka. Camp Minidoka is about 2 hours away from me. You know, and here we are. We're coming up on the 80th anniversary of that order, FDR. Okay, when it comes to the sins of the Holocaust, when it comes to the sins of the Weimar Republic, of Germany during that era, Arkansas. Yeah, Arkansas. Yeah. Germany was not alone with regards to their very public policy regarding eugenics, their very public policy regarding white supremacy, white superiority, and by extension, who was going to be allowed to live in the future empire. You know, Germany was not alone in that particular problem. Now, we are doing an awful lot to correct that. And a lot of that is going in and doing the analysis on the legislation, doing analysis on the legal code, doing the analysis correct them. Doing every day, looking at new legislation. Matter of fact, just here in Idaho, we went through, we've had legislation that just went in and allowed land owners, property owners, deed owners to go into the county clerk and have their deeds amended so that the white only clause for land ownership can be stricken from the deeds free of charge. Yeah, 2022. We just did that, folks. But that is an issue that's addressed by critical race theory. Legal documents, policy, jurisprudence, case law. We do not teach CRT in schools. Okay, moving on. Florida, man, Florida. Florida has created its own don't ask, don't tell policy, and it's currently going through, and it's likely to be signed by Governor Newsom. He's been very strong advocate for this particular policy. And we are currently dealing with a bit of blowback. Okay, because Newsom's don't ask, don't tell has to do with education in the United States. It has to do with education in Florida, education policy. Again, this goes back to where we are punishing teachers for something that is put into the curriculum, that is put into discussions. Okay. A teacher cannot answer questions related to LGBTQT issues in class, or even to a student who's afraid to talk to his parents about this, without risking severe fines. Now, there have been several states that have come through and done this, and not just with regards to DeSantis. Sorry, Newsom is California. You're right, Lana. DeSantis is Florida, and Newsom is California. I get the Disneys mixed up a lot. Sorry. Yeah, Amberly, good issues. Still strong culture going on. Okay, so DeSantis is very much in favor of this don't ask, don't tell. And what this is it's creating an isolating experience for those individuals who do experience, right? Oh, yeah. Out here in Idaho, neoconservative. If you're from Idaho, you know. If you're from Idaho, you know that's all there is. That's I'm going to have to leave that on that one for right now out here. Yeah, but don't ask, don't tell. Okay, again, this creates a situation that isolates children who identify as LGBTQT in high school and younger age. It's an interesting topic, Tyrone. It's not something, let's go ahead and bring this up. Okay, gender confusion from pre-birth. Okay, bar body deficit. Okay, there is science that's associated with this, and there are associations with regards to environment, family placement, childhood trauma, parental trauma during prenatal. All of these contribute to situations that may cause gender confusion. Okay, so how do you address this issue when you create the environment that the people who are most likely to know something about it, that is those people who see 500 kids a day, who are able to watch those 500 kids and understand the nuance, rather than those who are in the family, in the bubble, that only see their own children, then aren't able to grasp the diversity that's associated with their children in relationship to the community that they will have to go out and operate in. Okay. Most parents only work with 5 to 10 kids, their own and the children of their immediate friends. Teachers, whether it's public institutions, whether it's private institutions, whether it's charter schools, magnet schools, whatever, teachers are the ones that are looking at the diversity in the community. They're the ones who have an understanding of where a child may or may not be having a specific issue. Okay, now, I'm a school choice guy. I got my reasons for it. And I believe that parents should be able to pick and choose the education that they want for their children to the best of their ability. And yeah, I'm going to be a little bit classist here, because the ability you can afford. Okay. Yeah. Not a huge fan of Marx. I'm just going to put that out there, Tyrone. I'm not. I think he oversimplified some things and he left some significant issues out. The other thing is class reductionism kills. We can't wait, until everything is equal in order to discuss what's going on. Randy, brain developed separately, except, and yes, the issue of multi-chromosomes. We continue to see that in childhood development. And I don't want to call it transgender, intersex, I believe is the current term for those who are born with XXY, YYX, and other, and hermaphroditism. And again, I know I'm going to get, nailed on some of these terms because some of these terms are no longer appropriate in certain communities. However, these are continuing issues. They do exist. They are scientifically proven. The idea that there is only male and female, that went out a long time ago. Even the Greeks had their hermaphrodites, 2,000 years ago. Historical fact. We need to grow up and get over this. There's only two genders. That's not true. We know better. And yes, the teachers do have insight. Okay. Are all teachers good teachers? No, I'm not going to make that claim. And that said, over the course of 2-3 years, you do get access to good teachers. Students get access to good teachers. They get access to the good teachers just like they get access to the bad teachers. Okay. Not everything's equal. But the ability for the students, the ability for the teachers to be able to see, recognize, and address the issues and bring those issues to the parents' attention in a positive way is entirely dependent upon parents being receptive to what it is a teacher sees, which we continue to have significant problems with. Best friend. Yep. Got personal stories associated with that. They're not my stories to tell, though. So I'm going to refrain at the moment. But yes, Brandy. Co-start, yes, they've jumped the shark. The duop, they're completely over. And this is a problem. Okay. 10 years. Bible issue. Yeah. You know what, Tyrone? Let's go ahead and address this issue. Okay. Urologists have to deal with what's in front of them. Period. It's it. Medically, they have to take a look. They have to see what's there. And then from what they see, they have to go on from there. To a urologist, it's not 57 genders. It's what's in front of them when the patient shows up. It's always the way it's been about medical practice. Practice. Because you never see the same thing twice. Unless you're in the ER, in which case ER nurses know that you didn't slip and fall. That isn't how that ended up there. Okay. But urologists, they deal with what's in front of them. They don't worry about what the patient says. They have to deal with physical aspects of whatever urological problem is being presented to them. Choice of pronoun, self-identity. Self-identity, it's a big thing, folks. Okay? I identify as male. I was raised male. It's easy to see. But the thing is, for a number of reasons, people identify, they want to feel comfortable in their skin. They want to feel comfortable with their personality. Okay. If it's an issue for you, walk away. It's not that hard. walk away. If you can't cope with the way somebody else wants to present and be understood, freedom of association, it's always there for you folks. Freedom to disassociate. Okay. But don't ask, don't tell. This creates a situation where a teacher would have to pay out of their pocket. Teachers union isn't going to cover this bill for them. It's being ruled out. Same types of legislation is being written with regards to CRT. If a teacher accidentally says something that somebody thinks is CRT, they got to go through the suit. They got to pay out of their pocket, fines upwards of $10,000 in some states. Okay, without assistance, without going to the teachers union for assistance. Teachers are leaving, folks. Teachers are quitting. They're saying, enough of this. They don't need the hassle. They do not need the headache. We're seeing teachers quit in droves. That means teacher supply goes down. Teacher demand goes up. Wage requirements in order to meet the demands go up. Education is going to get real expensive for K through 12 here, folks, if some people don't learn to chill. And that includes school choice. Yes, it does. That includes school choice. Not just public schools, but your private teachers, your private schools, your Catholic schools. All those education costs are going to continue to go up and up and up. Right? Out here in Idaho. Do what you want as long as it doesn't interfere with what I want to do. You don't like what somebody else is doing? Leave. It's easy. If they get in your face about it, well, that gets dealt with in a different way. Somebody's polite, says peace. Everybody needs to leave happy. Or just leave. Doesn't matter. School children. Yeah. Whitewashed history, straight CIS, sexuality. And this is one of those things. We actually had an ode to homosexuality in Tombstone. We remember seeing several characters, which historically, I believe Oscar Wilde was one of them. There was another one of the characters that was associated with, we have a lot of history. We have a lot of individuals in our history, our founding fathers. I'm not sure. I think it was James Buchanan. Wasn't it James Buchanan who never actually had a first lady? Be an interesting concept. Definitely will. We're about to find out, aren't we, Idaho? Okay. Don't ask, don't tell. We're continuing to see these fines. This isolates LGBTQ children. They will no longer have access to the teachers because the teachers won't risk their career. They won't risk the fines. They won't risk the association that comes with talking to these children about gender-based issues. Which means that now these children have no one to talk to. These children who can't go home and talk to their parents about it. Yet they're going to continue to be harassed and bullied by their schoolmates, often being referred to derogatorily because, as Amber points out, we still teach in an anti-divergent way in the United States. Yes, we do. Okay, moving on. The Joe Rogan Show. Okay. Let's go ahead and talk about this. Joe Rogan. It's a lot of manufactured outrage over this. Spotify is doing extremely well. Every one of the artists who have decided to leave Spotify because of the Joe Rogan exclusivity with Spotify continues to do well within their own range. People are going to them, listening to them. Joe Rogan himself is actually doing fairly well as things are continuing to build for him. So in an awful lot of ways, this is manufactured outrage. This is PR, and it's PR that's working for Spotify. It's PR that is working for Joe Rogan. It is PR that is working for everybody who has decided, to leave Spotify for one of the other streaming platforms. Gloria, which question? Don't blame you, okay? Don't blame you. But what this is it's about public discourse. Where are you allowed to have it? Where are you not? Now, Spotify is a privately owned company. It does not own an exclusive on the market. Take care, Kay. Have a good one. Spotify does not have an exclusive on the streaming market. It does not have an exclusive on podcasts. You still have the old school ones like Pandora. You still have the monetization on YouTube. You have Odyssey that's coming out. Rumble has just stood up. Okay, so we are continuing to see a number of these issues develop. Now, this is like choosing which venue you want to go to listen to music. Okay, specific venues have specific attractions. They attract a particular kind of performer. They attract a particular kind of artist, a particular kind of speech. Yesterday's Russian bots, Putin puppets. And this is an interesting thing. We continue to see claims of free speech on one side by American citizens. Joe Rogan is an American citizen. He's got his own views. He's got his own opinions. In an awful lot of ways, I am not that different from him. I like to speak my mind. I like to have conversations with people. I like to talk about specific issues. Today I want to talk about education. Today I want to talk about CRT and teachers. Today I want to talk about public discourse. Joe Rogan does that. Admittedly, he spends 4 hours on it with someone as, a guest speaker on his show. I spend an hour on it talking to you, answering questions I consider important. Go Star, yeah, you're going back and you're taking a look at the mandates. But we talk about what's going on with a number of people. Joe Rogan, okay, he's not your cup of tea. Don't listen to him. If Spotify doesn't have an artist you like listening to, don't listen to Spotify. If Spotify has other issues, such as if you believe they have unethical treatment of their employees, if they don't handle their artists in an ethical way, by all means, go to a different platform. Spotify is not a monopoly. Now let's get back to the issue of public discourse. Okay, KRTD. It's about public discourse. It's about talking about issues, the things that are important to you, the things that are important to me, the things that are important to, basically anybody who's granted time on this platform to talk about a given issue. What are the things we like? Eminence, yeah. No reason to watch Joe for Joe. You watch Joe for his guests. It's always been the case. It's the individual guests that he brings on, whether they're left, whether they're right, whether or not there's somebody you're familiar with, on a different platform. Very few people go to Joe Rogan Experience for Joe. They go for his guests. And again, Joe has a platform. Joe is able to platform these individuals and allow them the ability to express their opinion to the world at large. So in a lot of ways, Joe Rogan is a champion for public discourse. He gives airtime to people who don't have access to other platforms like Kennedy on Fox or any of the MSNBC channels or CBS. Joe Rogan gives these other views an opportunity to be heard. He creates the openings in the Overton window that do not exist in today because of the way that our mass media limits what we can talk about, limits what we can understand, limits what we can discuss. Okay. We don't talk about the trade war in which the Ukraine is at the heart of. We talk about the military movements that are associated with the Russians along the Ukrainian border. We don't talk about childhood development and the new science that's part of that in education because we're focused on school choice. We're not looking at education reform because we now want to fund the student and follow the money. Gloria, let's go ahead and talk about that. Feelings, transitory. Facts are what they are, mathematically demonstrable. Toyota brake pads don't belong on farm tractors. To a certain degree, yes. For 95% of the population, 99% of the population, we still have that demographic which exists outside of our normal accepted reality. Daniel. This is an interesting topic, Daniel. And even though I realize you're probably a troll because you don't have your picture up, I want to go ahead and address this issue because it's a common misconception. Okay, public schools. Okay, public schools are all that's available to an awful lot of people. And unfortunately, because of the legislation in several states, public schools are the only option for most Americans. And that creates a significant problem. Unless we go in and actually address the issues associated with education reform, that is, follow the science of early childhood development, remodel the way that we learn, and rebuild the schools around the models that work, we stand a chance of fixing education. Peace, Daniel. Okay. And yes, most teachers are underpaid. And it doesn't matter whether they're public, private, Catholic school, whatever. Most teachers are significantly underpaid. So with that, folks, I have spent my hour. We got another show that's about ready to kick off. I appreciate your time this evening. I appreciate the opportunity for the public discourse. And yes, Toyota does make tractors. John Deere isn't the only one who does that. Peace, y'all.